Hello, chess friends, and welcome to Zadov's chess channel, and welcome to the Clutch Chess International Tournament in 2020. It's again Jeffery Xiong versus Magnus Carlsen. After day one, Magnus Carlsen was in the lead for 1 point, so this Clutch Chess International Tournament is a little bit different than usual because in this Clutch Chess International Tournament, games are evaluated differently. So it means that this game 5 and 6 were evaluated for 2 points for a win, and this other games like now in this particular day today, this game 7, 8, 9 and 10 will be evaluated only 1 point for the win, but then the game 11 and 12 are evaluated for 3 points. So this gives really players the opportunity to come back into the game. So again, it was now Jeffery Xiong's time to play with the white pieces. He was only 1 point behind Magnus Carlsen, and if Jeffery wins this game, then he will be equalized with Magnus. So let's see now what happened. We have e4 played by Jeffery, we have e5 by Magnus, knight to f3, knight to c6, and after d4 we have the Scotch game. I haven't analyzed for a while now a Scotch game. My father is playing this opening very often, so after e takes d4 we have knight takes d4 and bishop to c5. Still common theory. You can see also a good line if you have troubles maybe to play against the Scotch defense. Bishop to b4 is also an idea, and after c3 then to play bishop to c5. It's a similar position, but I think this c3 move could be annoying a little bit here for white, because white cannot use this square of c3 to get this knight on a very active square. So after the move c3, it would be sort of a main line here. But in the game, Magnus played the move bishop to c5, challenging immediately the knight on d4, and bishop to e3 was played. Here Magnus played queen to f6. If you take knight takes c6, it seems that you grab a piece, but that's the problem here. We have always the opportunity to take first. Bishop takes e3. The problem is the knight cannot take something else, so you would be forced first to take the bishop here with the pawn on e3, and now black can recapture the knight. White has really a weakened pawn structure, so it's not a good continuation here for white. So after the move queen to f6, so that's why c3 played by Jeffery, and we have a knight to e7, bishop to b5, castling here by Magnus. So in the game, bishop to b6 was played by Magnus because now this tactical threat could work to take knight takes c6, then followed with knight takes e7, sort of an in-between check. Let's see, maybe a bad move here for Magnus. Let's see, maybe h6. Then you see that here comes the problem. We have immediately the opportunity to play knight takes c6, and if you take the bishop here, then you get this in-between check. You would be forced here, I think, to take maybe with the pawn and then attack after bishop takes c5. Here c takes b5. Still, it's an unclear position because it's of course this opposite color bishops game in which both sides I think have good opportunities to play. But okay, this was sort of a sideline here. After the move castling, Magnus played the move bishop to b6, trying to stay with his Dachshund bishop on the board. We have now a4, cementing the bishop, and now Magnus plays a common move in the Scotch game, queen to g6. You see this move many times. It attacks the pawn on e4, also the pawn on g2. So far white has castled, so that's why this g2 pawn at least is not endangered, but there are maybe some tactical threats with d6 and bishop to h3, so white has to be careful here, and Jeffery plays the move bishop to d3. Here we have bishop takes d4 by Magnus, very simplification line sort of by Magnus, because you see now what he has prepared after c takes d4, knight to b4. The problem is the bishop doesn't have good squares. You lose the bishop anyway. If you try bishop to e2, you lose the pawn on e4. So it was, I think, a good idea here by Magnus to simplify the position. Here knight to c3, and Magnus simply takes. After queen takes d3, we have now a new position in which it seems like a drawish position because we have this opposite colored bishops. But there is one maybe slightly advantage that white has here. It's this pawn central control. So white has this 2 centralized pawns. On the other hand, black has only 1 centralized pawn, so it means this pawns on the d and d file. So these pawns you can really use in order to restrict always this 4 squares for black's minor pieces to play. What black should probably do here is to try to keep the position compact, try to keep the position close, try to block these pawns, and maybe try to do something here on the queen side, because on the queen side black has a 3 versus 2 pawn majority. So it is sort of a battle, central pawn storm against queenside pawn storm. So who will be faster, I think, will probably win the game. But still, because of this bishop, this is really an equalish game. Even if this game goes into an endgame, I think with opposite color bishop, most of the times you see draw. So here Magnus played the move d5, which is a good move, of course. It forces basically white to support this e4, e5 or e takes d5 is not possible, of course, because you lose the queen. But this is a good move as you're challenging immediately white's pawn central control. Here f3 played by Magnus, and now c6, cementing the knight. And we have now queen to d2, getting out of this potential pin by the queen on the queen. And here Magnus played bishop to e6. Okay, it's still, I think, slightly better here position for white, as this bishop on e3 has still a better activity. So far, this bishop is not good, but Magnus Carlsen will find a way to improve the position of the piece here at rook to e1, and now rook to e8, knight to e2, with the preparation to play knight to f4. Here in the game, knight to f6 was played, and here Jeffery played e5. It seems that knight to f4 brings you something, but it's really not such a powerful move, because you can simply play queen to f7 after knight takes e6, queen takes e6. Here e takes d5 would be sort of a possibility, but now knight takes d5, and I think black is better here if white goes into this line, because there is one problem. This knight on d5 is cemented. It cannot be attacked by any minor piece anymore, so you see you don't have a c pawn or e pawn, so this centralized knight would be really the best piece on the board. Okay, you could try maybe discover the attack, but would simply get away, and here white doesn't have any good discovery, so that's why in this position I think black is really better. Okay, this bishop still has good activities, maybe bishop to g3, but it's basically useless because it doesn't aim into some attacking possibilities. Here knight to d5 would be perfectly fine. So see, after this move, knight to e2 and f6, Jeffery didn't play this move. Knight to f4, very nice. Very nice positional understanding by Jeffery to not chase the bishop here in e6, and in the game he played this very, very powerful e5 move. So it challenges immediately black's pawn structure here in front of the king. And the good thing is, after this move f takes e5, d takes e5, what Jeffery Xiong has accomplished here, that he has now these two pawns which are connected, and you see these pawns could really create some dynamics here on the king side. On the other hand, Magnus hasn't secured so far an attack on the queen side. You see, Magnus hasn't improved the position of the pawns on the queen side. Still, you need many moves. As I said, we have this central pawn storm battle against this potential queen side pawn storm battle. So it seems to me that white is really slightly better here, because black didn't make any progress here on the queen side. Still needs many moves, because you cannot play c5, you cannot play d4, you have to play something like b6, then maybe c5. You have to really lose many tempos in order to make your queenside attack work. So b6, you see Magnus is preparing this idea, and b4. Jeffery stops the queenside attack. We have rook to c8, and now rook to c1. Rook to d8, we have knight to d4, and now Magnus plays h6 in order to prevent maybe this bishop to come to g5. He wants to play much more freely with the queen, and there is one problem if we evaluate this positional trades of pieces. If black, for instance, if white, for instance, takes out this knight, and maybe try something like knight to e2 and then knight to f4 or f4, f5. So you see, we would love to get rid at least one of this piece. We would love to maybe give up here the bishop for the knight, and then try to push this pawn further, because then if we get this pawn on the f file somehow to this f5 square, it could be really dangerous. So that's why h6 here by Magnus, a very nice prophylactic move, and we have e5. So here Jeffery breaks the pawn storm that Magnus Carlsen has created on the queen side. We have rook to d7, which was maybe not the best of moves here by Magnus. He played simply too fast, I think, here in this particular position. A better idea is maybe to improve somehow the position of the queen, or battling here on the f-file. c5 so far is not a possibility. That's the problem, because you will simply play b takes c5 after something like rook takes c5, rook takes c5. Okay, b takes c5. Then knight to e6, that's the problem here in Magnus Carlsen's position. After queen takes e6, bishop to c5. So this is the tactical threat you cannot take. Here the pawn, you would get rook to e1 and you lose the piece. So you have to be careful. So here Magnus tried rook to d7, but it's really not the best of moves. He's trying maybe to prepare this rook to c7 and then c5 idea to get his pawn stone working, because the bishop and the rook are controlling, of course, this very important c5 square. So in the game, rook to e1 played by Jeffery, and we have rook to b7. Here Magnus tries another way, but Jeffery Xiong first takes, a takes b6, and we have a takes b6, and now queen to e2. Rook to b8, Magnus improves the position of the rook, but again, you see, it's not easy to make this pawn storm happening because this bishop's activity is a huge one. And here bishop to f2, a very nice positional move by Jeffery Xiong, keeping the position compact but staying on this very nice diagonal. So in the game, bishop to h3 played by Magnus, and I think Jeffery Xiong makes here a mistake. He plays bishop to g3. It's not a mistake in which Jeffery Xiong would lose the game, but here he has already a good position. Queen to f1 I think is much better. You're protecting this, but again, you're preventing the c5 idea. That's the main point. We're not allowing the c5 move, because if c5 in this position happens, then we can simply take b takes c5, b takes c5. That would be a better line here for Jeffery. And now knight to e2. You see, your pawn is attacked and your bishop is attacked. If you retreat with the bishop, then we can simply take the pawn. If we advance the pawn, then you get knight to f4 and you lose the piece. So that's the problem here by Magnus Carlsen. He played too aggressively here on the king side. So bishop to f2, staying with the queen to on f1 and protecting is a much better idea. But in the game, bishop to g3 played by Jeffery, okay, it's still creating this attack on the bishop, but you're not anymore on this very important diagonal. So that's why here c5 played by Magnus, knight to b5. Again, the bishop is hanging, and that's why bishop to e6, and now knight to d6 played by Jeffery. He has now a very powerful outpost, and now rook to c6. In this position, it seems maybe that white is much better, because white has this powerful outpost, but it's really an equal position, because when you play on outposts, you want to have at least some kind of an attack with this outpost. Basically, when you play against outposts, like against this knight on d6, you should get your pieces out of the way of the outpost. So now you see this rook to c6 idea comes with that particular idea. You simply get out of the range of the knight, and still you have also a very powerful here 2 pawns now on the c and d file. So it's now time for us to advance the pawn here with the move c4. In the game, Jeffery tried queen to b5, attacking the rook, and Magnus tried rook to a8, b takes c5, and here comes the mistake by Magnus. Rook to a5, attacking the queen. It's not such a good idea, because queen to b4, we can simply stay. And now after rook to c5, here comes the problem of that position. Here, instead of this rook to a5 idea, here Magnus or rook to a8 or rook to a5 idea, Magnus should have simply played c4. He has still a compact position. Nothing can be attacked. This knight has still a powerful outpost, but if we violate now this bishop's strength, it's simply blocked out by its own pawn. We have created a blockade. We have secured the position. The position is compact. You cannot move pawns anymore. But as I said, in the game, rook to a8 played by Magnus, tricky idea maybe, but it was risky. After b takes c5, you see rook to a5. It's not a problem, because we can simply take rook takes c5, and now rook takes c5. After b takes c5, here comes the stunner, which Magnus Carlsen missed in the game. He blundered basically. Queen to b7, attacking the knight. If you move the knight, you lose simply. You lose simply the rook. You cannot protect this knight anymore. That's the main problem, because you cannot protect this knight with some queen to f7 moves or queen to e8. So there's no good square. Queen to f6 is also not possible. There's no good square to protect this knight, and that's why Magnus tried c4. Here Jeffery simply takes, and after c3 we have queen to b7, rook to c5, and now queen to b6. In this position, Magnus Carlsen resigned. So he blundered this game, had I think an equal position, got out finally of this central mess, but blundered really this idea to activate his rook on the a file. Jeffery Xiong grabbed the opportunity, has now an equal result. We'll see what will happen in the continuation of this match game. It will be a tough one for Magnus Carlsen. If you believe that he will win this very easily, you may get surprised. As I said, meanwhile, you can watch my other commented chess games from this tournament so far. Here's the link, and you can also watch my best chess games of all time if you want to see the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best.